It's quite funny how many of us journalists had stories about the original Karizma when we went for the launch of this new gen model. I suppose that tells you a little bit about how old we are, but it also suggests what a legend the Karizma is. In my own case, it was one of the first geared motorcycles that I ever rode, and those memories are deeply imprinted on my mind. This is the new Karizma XMR. Hero says the legend is back. And I suppose my big question today is, how much of the original Karizma essence lies in this all-new motorcycle? Now when we say all new, this literally is all new. Everything is new on this bike, and it's a first for Hero. You've got Hero's first DOHC liquid-cooled engine. It's a 210cc motor. It makes about 25 horsepower and about 20 Newton meters of torque. And those figures are up there with the KTM RC200 and the Bajaj RS200, and a little lower than the Suzuki Gixxer 250. Then you have a brand new steel trellis frame, and again this is new for a Hero. And then there's the style. Now I'm a little conflicted here. I think that this is a very nice looking motorcycle. It's got a good sense of proportions. It doesn't look too large, it doesn't look too small. The fuel tank is at a nice height. It all comes together very well. But is this a Karizma? Because my memories of the Karizma were of a more upright, taller, semi-faired motorcycle. This thing takes it to the completely faired league. Now if you think about it, the rivals to this bike are the motorcycles I mentioned earlier. RS200 from Bajaj, RC200 from KTM, Gixxer 250 at a stretch, and the Yamaha R15. Now that motorcycle sells almost 10,000 units a month, and Hero definitely wants a slice of that pie. In that regard, this bike definitely makes more power than the R15, but it weighs quite a bit more. It's 163 kilos, while the R15 is just around the 140 kg mark. Riding experience-wise, it is quite different to the R15 as well. The R15 is a more hardcore, focused motorcycle, whereas this aims to be more of a sport tourer, and you can see that in the riding position. The seat height is 810 mm, which is quite a friendly height. Riders of most shapes and sizes should get along with this. The pillion seat, however, is quite tall, and some of our shorter people out here on the shoot today had a funny time trying to get up here. Nevertheless, the riding position, this is quite comfortable. It is not like the old Karizma that had a very upright, commanding riding position. This is more sport tourer-like. Now, if we were to compare it against the R15 that's like this, and the Bajaj RS200 that's the more relaxed, off-the-faired motorcycles, I'd say this is closer to the RS200. I think it's a little more comfortable than the Suzuki Gixxer 250, and it's definitely way more comfortable than the R15. We spent about 3 hours on the motorcycle today, and I really don't have any aches in my wrists, in my hips. It's all been quite nice. And if you're someone tall like me, well, it's a pretty spacious and comfortable motorcycle as well. Your knees don't feel locked in, the cockpit is nice and wide, and there's a nice view out here. Now, speaking of a nice view, this bike does not get a TFT display. That loud sound you're hearing is the radiator fan, which, yeah, that's a first on a Hero. Anyway, this motorcycle gets an LCD display, but it's quite informative. We have been riding in peak afternoon heat with bright overhead sunshine, and it hasn't been difficult to read. There's a lot of Bluetooth compatible features in there as well. It's quite detailed, and I don't really miss a TFT. If you want the colors, you will miss it, but this is a nice and informative display. Another neat feature here is that this is the first affordable made-in-India motorcycle with an adjustable windscreen. The button is out here, you press that, and you can move it up and down. Now, the actual range of motion isn't very much. We haven't really been able to ride the bike at high speeds today and test that out, but it's something fun to show your friends. I also like the attention to detail all over. These are some of the nicest stock mounted mirrors I've seen in a while. They're large and they have a good range of adjustability. The switch gear is also quite nice, and this bike comes with hazard lights. Now, let's talk about the actual performance. The old Karizma, like I said, was all about the torque. This is very different. This engine has a top end. The low end is nice and soft, it doesn't get grumbly, doesn't lurch around, and it's quite tractable as well. You can just stick it in a higher gear and ride smoothly with traffic. But when you want to move, you have to rev this engine out. The real fun only starts above 6,000 RPM. Once you hit the 7,000 RPM mark, it really starts picking up and it pulls hard all the way to 10,000 RPM. There is a nice induction sound above 7,000 RPM as well, and it gets quite loud. But overall, this is still a pretty conventional sounding single cylinder engine. Now, since this is a brand new motor, you probably want to hear what it sounds like. Like I said, pretty conventional at low RPM, but it sounds nice, loud, raspy and a little angry when you hit the high RPMs. As for actual performance, we haven't been able to test it today. We haven't been able to hit high speeds on the highway. We should be able to cross the 100 kph mark quite easily, but what lies above that, I can't really tell you at the moment. We will have to get the bike back home and properly test it. What I can tell you about right now is comfort. Now, like I said, the old Karizma was a big softie, a little too soft. It was out of its depths when it came to the racetrack. This is a much nicer handler. The chassis itself feels very stable. It has a nice mix between agility and stability, which makes it nice and light feeling in traffic, but it never gets twitchy. Even at higher speeds, if you hit a bump, it feels nice and stable. As for the suspension, for the most part, this is a very nicely comfortable motorcycle. Two things, however, stood out. If you hit a really big pothole, that fork tends to bottom out. And sometimes when you're pushing the bike hard on a set of winding roads, the rear does feel a little soft and light on rebound. Now we will give the bike the benefit of the doubt because that preload adjustable shock is set quite low. It's just on level 2 out of 6. So ramping it up will probably give the rear suspension a better sense of control when you're pushing it on winding roads. But for now, I can tell you that this is not a hardcore handling focused motorcycle, and an R15 will out-handle this thing. So will an RC200. This bike lies more along the Gixxer 250 side of things. It's very capable, you will have fun around corners, but you don't buy it to go attack corners. Its overall vibe is more about all-round capability and a decent level of comfort. Like the rest of the demeanor of this motorcycle, where it's not overtly sporty, the same thing applies to the brakes. They're powerful enough, but they're not as sharp as you might expect from a bike that looks like this. If you happen to get stuck in traffic, you'll be happy to find that the clutch is not too heavy and the bike doesn't get overtly hot. There is some warmth that you'll feel around the fuel tank area, but there's no direct blasts of hot air hitting you in any one place. Features-wise, the new XMR is quite nicely loaded. You have what Hero tells us is a powerful LED headlamp. Again, we haven't been able to test it today. There's a USB port neatly mounted right next to the key, and the bike has a slip assist clutch as well as a 6-speed gearbox, which I didn't mention earlier. But there is one missing feature that customers in this segment might end up expecting, and that's the USD fork. This bike has a telescopic fork, which is a little strange because the lower Extreme 164V now gets an upside-down fork, and it's available in its main rival, the R15. The RC200 also has a USD. That is something that customers may end up wanting, and Hero may be just saving that for a future update. Nevertheless, the potential cost savings of not having a USD fork are reflected in the price. At 1.73 lakh ex-showroom, which is an introductory price, this motorcycle costs exactly the same as the Bajaj RS200, and it's about 10,000 rupees cheaper than the Yamaha R15 in its base spec. The RC200 and the Gixxer 250 are also more expensive than this bike, and that makes it quite appealing. My overall impressions after having spent a fun few hours with this bike are that it's a very nice motorcycle, but is it a Karizma? I don't really think so. It doesn't have that low-end torque that the Karizma was famed for. The styling is completely different, the riding position is different, and the positioning is different as well. That legend is a different legend, and maybe this will grow into one of its own someday. Nevertheless, that does not change the fact that this motorcycle is quite a likable thing, and I can't wait to spend more time with it. We want to ride it against its rivals, see how it fits into the segment, and let you know which is the one that we think is the best. Nevertheless, it's a good time to be out buying a fared motorcycle in the sub 250cc segment.